Hi again, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Loose Wheels, the auto racing podcast of the Kennebec Journal and the Morning Sentinel. My name is Travis Barrett. I am the auto racing writer at centralmaine.com. Happy to have you along as we are every week. We're celebrating a little bit of an anniversary this week. This is our 10th episode. God, it's gone by so fast. I mean, can you even believe it? It feels like just 10 weeks ago it was nothing more than a dream. A little idea that hadn't yet hatched, and now here we are, all grown up and flying along. Thanks for humoring me. Anyway, we have really kind of a full show this week, and we've got a little bit of something for everybody. We're going to talk about the 70th anniversary of Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. They're celebrating that this week. We're going to talk about a big weekend over at Oxford Plains Speedway. They've got a Pro All-Star Series 150 there coming up on Sunday. I believe it is billed as the last chance to automatically qualify for the Oxford 250, which is a month away. Like, we've started the countdown, which is crazy. It also means that summer is flying right by. So that's kind of a big deal. And then, this Sunday, centralmaine.com, we're going to have a feature story on drag racing in Maine, and we've talked to a bunch of people and have a few more still that we're tracking down, but really looking forward to that. So we're gonna talk a little drag racing here on the podcast this week too. So it was kind of a weird week last week. Beech Ridge was off for their Day of Destruction program, so there was no racing there. Oxford was also off. They ran some acceleration series stuff, but really, it was a unique weekend in that there was no Pro Stock / Super Late Model racing anywhere in Maine. Over at Wiscasset Speedway, I think it's kind of fitting as they roll up on their 49th birthday this week. Ryan St. Clair was the late model winner over there, and he's one of the grandsons of legendary former Wiscasset owner Dave St. Clair, Boss Hog, as we all know well. So congratulations to Ryan, all those teams over there. But like I said, summer's rolling, man. And so we're not wasting any time, and we're gonna get right to it. Before we do, I just want to remind you, again, centralmaine.com/sports for all your auto racing coverage. You can find us on Facebook, Central Maine Sports, and you can also find us on Twitter at CentralME Sports. And you can find me on Twitter as well, at TBarrettGWC, kind of a callback to my former life there in the Twitter handle. But speaking of my former life and my present life, we've got Greg Emerson, who is the spotter / tire guy / general manager / team confidant for Naughty 40 Racing. With Dan McKeag, who is just 3 points out of the Pro Series lead and the NASCAR Whelen All-American Series standings at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. So without further ado, let's get this podcast rolling. Here is Greg Emerson on this week's Loose Wheels. Okay, so we have Greg Emerson on the phone now. Greg, I want to take a minute, first of all, to thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
You bet.
I'll expect my check in the mail any day now.
It should. You know what? As soon as it clears, it'll be right there. This is going to be a tricky one because you and I know each other really well, so we have to keep this somewhat professional. Okay, my job's at stake.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. For people that don't know, Greg has been involved with the Naughty 40 team at Beech Ridge for a bunch of years now. Most notably, he's the spotter for Dan McKeag. Dan was the 2010 Pro Series champion there, and it's had a really good season. He's only a couple of points here out of the point lead he had early on. Greg, how's the team sort of found a second gear, if you will, this year? Because it feels like you guys are back to where you were accustomed to running, a few years ago.
To be honest, I don't want to sound conceited about it at all, but we did a complete, total team restructure over the winter, and they all tease me and call me the GM or general manager. I don't know if that. I don't know. I take it all serious, and Dan has a lot of confidence in me, and him and I work really well together because we think very similarly. So we restructured the whole team, basically. Our tire guy had to move on to do some different stuff, and our longtime crew chief, Jason Kennedy, his son decided that they were going to race Wildcat, so he moved, on with him, which that's awesome, and they actually work out of our shop and stuff. But we had to come up with a crew chief, and we had to come up with a tire guy, and so while we were doing that, and those guys are backbones to the team. So we restructured everything.
Yeah, and you brought Robbie in, so.
Yeah, I started talking with Rob last summer, actually a little sooner than that. And then he reached out to me, and one thing played off another. And actually, there's a group of us, from the team and stuff that we actually go down to the Snowball Derby down in Pensacola every winter, and we just go as fans. And I would sit in the bleachers and we're watching heat or a race. I don't even remember, but Dan, because it's so loud, Dan runs over and he holds his phone up in front of me, and it was Rob sending him a text. You want me to be your crew chief next year, And I can't say on the radio what Dan's response was, but the fact that he wanted it that much and the confidence that it brings to him, it allows him to be the driver on Saturday night and not worry so much about the car during the week, which his kids are getting older, so that allows him to go to the baseball and the basketball games and whatnot. These are things that 20-year-old Greg and Dan didn't have to worry about, but now 40-year-old Greg and Dan have to worry about. The kids and the wife, and it freed up his schedule, and it gives him that more confidence, and So we did a whole restructure, and everybody is just doing their job, and it's kind of gelling. I mean, like you said, we're not very far out of the point lead, and we destroyed a car 3-4 weeks ago and had to totally regroup and get a new car and make all kinds of changes. I mean, that's totally the commitment level that Dan's at. So,
are you back to where you want to be in terms of the way that the car's going now? Do you feel like you guys can win it all?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we can.
Yeah.
I think we definitely have the talent, but we're still learning this new car. It's not the same chassis. It's a Fury chassis. It's not, the other chassis that we had. So
yeah,
it's something we're learning still. So
yeah. Well,
can we go? Yeah, I think we can, but everything has to fall into place. It's not, at Beach Ridge, it's not a gimme. The talent pool is overflowing as far as, there's three guys that have won Oxford 250s there, or two guys, three guys, but Curtis, Wayne Hallowell, and Mike Rowe, and then you got 6 track champions.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's when I know Trevor Sanborn and I were talking about it last week, and when you really look at that field, it's unbelievable, really. To see a short track field like that is just, that's it's impressive. Right? There's no other way to say it. You have to be on your game to win a championship there for sure.
Right, and Trevor is no slouch. He hasn't. You can't say, well, Trevor hasn't won a championship or this, but the guy has won some big races.
Yeah. Yeah.
He spent most of his time he spent floating around. He hasn't locked himself into a situation that often,
Yeah.
So
that's what
you have to do for championships. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if we look at the 70th anniversary of Beach Ridge, and so I kind of want to ask you about how you got started in racing and when you started, and of course it's going to lead us into a discussion about how different it is today, but maybe how did you get started in racing? Do you remember your first time you ever got to Beach Ridge, or ever went in the pit area, ever helped out with a race team? I'm sure you do, but you can tell us about it.
I got started going to Beach Ridge when I was 3 years old.
There you go.
And
so that was like 57 years ago, right? If I do the math.
You know, I'm the same age as you, so no. I sat in the bleachers between the flag stand and turn one on the main stretch until I was 15 years old. And then when I was 15 years old, because, you know, always had those parents who would let their kid, you know, sneak into the pits or sign off. My mother would never sign off a fake thing until I could go to the pits early. She made me wait until I was 15.
Right.
That was the stipulation she had with my father. And my uncle always had raced, and my father was always his crew chief. And as soon as the year hit that I was 15, because my birthday's in January, that spring, I started working on my uncle's race cars and spent, you know, 6 or 8 years with him. And I spent, you know, 4 or 5 with another friend and 1 or 2 with this guy. And I spent a year doing Bush North with Dale Shaw, and I locked into helping Dan, and I've been with Dan for 18 years. Well, 17 years. It'll be 18 next year. So.
Yeah, that's crazy.
17 years with one old cracker.
How much has short track racing at Beech Ridge changed in all those years? We'll call it 3 decades, Craig. We'll call it 3 decades.
Okay. We might as well, because next year will be my 30th year of going in the pit to Beech Ridge.
Yeah, I did the math. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, when I started helping my uncle in 1989, I believe it was, 89 to 92, 3. And my uncle raced Limited Sportsman, which is now the Sports Series at Beech Ridge. Basically, when they were Limited Sportsmen in that time frame, they were what the Wildcats are now.
Right.
So the evolution, you know, what the Wildcats were then is what, like, a Thursday Thunder car is now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The whole evolution. So I started helping my uncle then. Now there's 16 Sports Series on a great night at Beech Ridge. When I was racing with my uncle, we had upwards of almost 60 to 80 cars in Limited Sportsman.
Wow.
And they had 2 heats, and then they had a consi, and if you didn't qualify in the consi, you put it on the trailer.
Right.
And there's high point guys that were going home, not racing the feature that night.
Wow.
But they had those, but they also had the semi-feature, which were the low point guys, and they would run the semi-feature, which would be 20 cars, and, you know, guys would get like the same amount of points as they would for the main feature, so that they eventually cycled, you know, if they came late or something like that, they eventually cycled so that they got enough points to start in the main feature. Usually about halfway through the season, it cycled out, so all the decent cars were in the main feature, and all the, you know, the guys who were struggling were in the creature feature, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And they had 15 to 20 late model sportsmen, which are now what we call pro stocks. And at that time, they had the modifieds, you know, at Beech Ridge Weekly, which they ended up getting rid of those after a guy passed away in a crash, Kenny Wilkinson. And they were having a lot of trouble with people across the country dying in modifieds. So Beech Ridge opted to get out of those, and they created this Super Sportsman series, which was pretty close to what the sports series are now.
Yeah.
And they ran that until the late 80s, and then they just evolved the sports series up, got rid of those, moved the Wildcat up, you know, to make, and they had a 4-cylinder car class for a few years, and, you know, there was a time when they used to race a Wildcat race on Thursday nights when they first started doing Thursday Thunder at Beech Ridge. So,
wow.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about the evolution. And I mean, when I started helping my uncle, we were going to the junkyard and taking parts off cars.
Yeah.
You know, now that don't happen.
Right.
that is rare. I mean, you might still get a spindle or upper control arm, lower control arm, but It's not like that.
Yeah.
Not like it was.
No,
I mean, when I started helping him, I used to have to go to the junkyard and search for Ford fan boats because they had aluminum bumpers because we had to run stock bumpers on the cars.
Right.
We couldn't run a plastic cover with a pipe underneath it,
Yeah. I feel like if I had to pick one way that, only one, and I realize there's several different ways that the sport has changed and evolved, but if I had to pick one way that I think has changed the most, I feel like it's more expensive for guys to go racing, to get started and getting good equipment. But at the end of the day, I feel like more guys are prepared to be competitive immediately because of the marketplace now. That's probably, to me, is the biggest difference. It's not 2 or 3 guys every week. It's a half a dozen guys, 8 guys, and really everybody's got the same stuff. And if they don't have the same stuff, they've got stuff that's kind of the hand-me-down stuff. So even the back markers, they're really not that far out to lunch. Not like what we would think.
No. No, so. And when you talk, 25, 30 years ago, and we had a 60 to 80 car field of limited sportsmen.
Yeah.
It was literally probably 10 or 15 of those that on any. I mean, you get your random guy that could win a race, but
sure.
You had probably 10, 15 of those on a given week that could win.
Yeah.
These were the regular guys that were going to win in that time frame. Coming from the back, they're going to hustle.
Yeah.
So you're looking at what 10, 15%.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, 10%, 6%, or something like that. And now you got 15 cars, and 10 of them can win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has changed.
That's the percentage is different. And is it because people buy parts? Probably. People don't have to be a genius,
Right.
Like they could. There's a lot more literature now. There's a lot more ways to learn stuff. I mean, Speedway Illustrated magazine is a great source of information.
Right.
A lot of times, it sounds ridiculous, but it really is.
Yeah.
And there was no website. There was no internet then.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Now I can find something in Georgia if I need to.
Yeah, true. And have it delivered overnight.
Right.
Click this button. Here's my visa. Boom. It'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you before because we're already going over. I want to talk to you about spotting because I do think that I think it's gotten more attention in the last few years, but I still think probably people don't understand how important it can be even at the weekly level at a place like Beech Ridge, and certainly, on the Pro All-Star Series and some of those regional tours. Was that something you ever thought that you might get involved doing someday, or did you kind of just happen to be the guy that they were like, here, take the headset and go talk, and then you realized that you like doing it?
No, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I was always into like the chassis stuff and stuff like that, which kind of still am.
Yeah.
But I let other people do their job. So, and they in turn let me do my job.
Yeah.
I think it just kind of happened, more or less. I never planned it.
Yeah.
I just kind of started doing it. I started taking over, and Dan's finally like, why don't you just make a commitment to do this? And he liked what I had for feedback to him, and so, and now, since then I've gone on to do some different stuff. I certainly spot for Dan, but I've spotted for Mike Rowe on the Pro All-Star Series when he was driving for Steve Perry, and I spotted for John Peters in the Granite State race. There's too much stuff to list, but then last year I got a chance to spend 4 or 5 races spotting for a Valente mod for Sammy Ramo out of Massachusetts, and that was kind of cool, So it's definitely, it's definitely very different. And I own all my equipment, and I take care of all my equipment, and it's not, if people knew how much the right stuff costs, they would be like, what? You're doing this?
Yeah.
But it's the same as a guy going out and buying a pair of skis and a ski pass every weekend,
Yep. Yeah.
So it's the same idea,
Yeah.
Or a set of golf clubs and paying green fees.
Sure. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. True story.
Similar,
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's intense.
Yeah.
I don't see the race.
Right.
I never see the race because I'm always looking ahead, looking behind, moving around. I'm never watching. The race would be over, and you might come up to me and go, "Oh my God, did you see the battle that Reed and Dave Farrington had?" And I'll be like, "I didn't even know they were racing."
Right.
Unless we were right behind them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't see the race when I do it, and my concentration level is over the moon.
Yeah. I've noticed.
It's taxing on the mind, very, and
yeah.
I don't know. And I'm good friends with Derek Nealand, and he said, it's way easier to spot a big track than it is a short track,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know how true it is. I don't like to toot my horn. So
yeah, no.
You have to ask Dan about it.
Not publicly. Yeah, not publicly. I want to end with this. I want to end with, we mentioned the 70th anniversary. I'm going to give you 2 minutes because I like to give you time limits. As most people don't know that when Greg calls me out of the blue, I give him a time limit because Greg and I can talk forever. 70th anniversary at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. What would it mean to be part of a championship team in a season like this? What would that mean to you? 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes.
It would be really cool.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter that it's the 70th to me. A championship is so hard to get at Beech Ridge.
Yeah.
That it means everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been part of a team that's won one. We've won some Pro All-Star Series past sportsman championships, but they don't mean as much. They do mean stuff, but they don't mean as much as the championship at Beech Ridge. The weekly championship at Beech Ridge is tough.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes for all the classes there.
Mm.
It's a status thing.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. Well, I wonder.
So, the 70th would be way cool.
Yeah.
It would be, it's an anniversary, but I think it would just be cool to win the championship, regardless of what year it is.
Fair enough. Well, listen. On that note, I'm gonna let you go. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to do this. I appreciate it. I'm glad we got through it without yelling and screaming at each other.
Thanks for having me, and have me on anytime. I'll do it whenever you need filler.
That's the spirit.
Thanks to Greg, and I think one of the things that we kind of missed in that, the Robbie we were talking about is Robbie Harrison, who's he's done some stuff. He's worked in NASCAR at the K&N Series level with Dave Davis, a few years ago, and has helped out some other teams over there at Beech Ridge. And I think, I'm not sure that it's just Robbie or just Greg or just Garrett or just any of those guys. It's really been a really neat resurgence for that 40 team over at Beech Ridge. So best of luck to them the rest of the year. They're right in the mix. We talked about it. It's such a shootout there, So I think that series is that season, that championship battle is really going to come right down to the wire in September. So as we kind of always expect at Beech Ridge, part of it's the handicap system, part of it's the point structure, and part of it certainly is the depth of the field in all their divisions. Those championships seem to come right down to the wire more often than not at Beech Ridge. So good to see that 40 team right in the mix as they try to win their first championship since 2010. Just looking ahead here, TB's press box, not so much a rant, but really kind of a big deal at Oxford Plains Speedway this coming Sunday. It is a 150-lap per All-Star Series race. This is not like the race they had, obviously, earlier this month for non-winners and a chance to get into the Oxford 250. This is really kind of the last test at Oxford before the 250. You've got summer heat. You've got a race that's going to happen late afternoon, early evening, and you're going to have all the teams there. And certainly because it falls on a Sunday afternoon, my guess is you're going to see a bunch of teams there, too, that aren't weekly competitors at Oxford, aren't necessarily full-time Pro All-Star Series competitors, but you're going to see some guys there that are, A, trying to win that race and get themselves into the Oxford 250 at the end of August, but also really trying to kind of dial their cars in. And we have seen a trend over the last few years that the guys that do well at Oxford in the summer races there tend to be the guys that have really, really strong showings at the Oxford 250. And we've talked about Wayne Hellewell in the past. He and Joey Powarzik had that, that dead heat race there where they both were credited with a win a couple of seasons ago. And so it's really a big deal. Like, I think in the past I used to look at it like, it's just a race and it's kind of a way to, promote or sell tickets. But this is the last chance you're going to have where there's a lot of cars and a lot of rubber and all the conditions are changing, and at the same time the conditions are kind of right for what you're going to see. I think what you see at Oxford in April is not what you're going to see there in the heat of August. So this should be a really interesting race on Sunday. I'm planning on being there, so I'm kind of looking forward to see how it shakes out, who kind of rises to the top, see if there's any surprises, or if we see if it's still the Kurt Gary and Reed Lanford show. On the flat tracks here, certainly Travis Benjamin, you expect him to be around. So looking forward to it, and I think you should check it out. But speaking of Oxford and Oxford, Maine, we're gonna shift gears. See how I did that? We're going to do that. We're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about drag racing in the state of Maine. As I mentioned before, I've been working on a feature story that's going to drop this weekend. And I think if you're a fan of motorsports, I think you'll like it. It's a little bit different. But we've got Jamie Madison, who is from Lewiston. He's a native of Canton, Maine. Been a drag racer for a bunch of years. Been involved in a drag racing family. Runs a streetcar over at Oxford Plains Dragway. Has also run a purpose-built dragster in national events and divisional series events around the Northeast, including New Jersey and Canada. He's gone with the family out to Pennsylvania. So he's a guy who's got his finger on. He's got 60 wins at Oxford. He's got some championships. He's leading the street division points over at Oxford. And so really a neat conversation here with Jamie about, what drag racing is and how it's doing in Maine and also what it takes to win drag races, because I think many people think it's just the green light goes on, you smash the gas as fast as you can, you try to get to the finish line before the other guy and you win. It's not really that simple. Certainly at the weekly level where it's all bracket racing, it's a fascinating kind of sport, and it's a fascinating motorsport that is very different from stock car racing and circle track stuff. So anyway, we caught up with Jamie. Here's our conversation with him as we talk to Jamie Madison, street division point leader and multi-time champion at Oxford Plains Dragway, on this week's Loose Wheels. So we have Jamie Madison on the phone. Jamie is from Lewiston. He's originally from Canton. He is a drag racer in the street class over at Oxford Plains Dragway. Jamie, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to join the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, you might want to save that until after we're done. Make sure I don't, throw you under the bus or anything. But we'll go easy on you.
That's good.
So let me ask you. I'll just ask you right off. So Jamie and I, unlike some of the guests we've had on the podcast, I have not known Jamie that long. I met him a couple of weeks ago over at the Dragway. And we talked a little bit about the sport in general. So I'll do it again here, and I'll ask you, Jamie, about drag racing in Maine. If you were to kind of sum it up, it's such an open-ended question, I realize, but if people knew nothing about drag racing and knew nothing about drag racing in Maine, and I said in 3 sentences, can you describe the sport to people? How would you do that? How's that?
Sorry. I would say it's a thrill. I think that what the unknown about it is that you need nothing special to do it with, and I don't believe a lot of people know that. They always think they need something special. And it's as simple as bringing your grocery getter to the track.
Yeah. How did you get started in it? How did you get started in drag racing, and what was it about it that attracted you immediately?
Well, what attracted me to it was going to it. I went to some NHRA national events as a little kid, and the noise and the rubber and the smell of the fuel, and that's what attracted me to it. And then my family actually got a couple of their own drag cars, and then I really wanted to help them. And as I helped them, I realized I really wanted to drive, and so that's kind of what got me started.
Yeah. And so, how long have you been? For those that don't know you, how long have you been drag racing yourself now?
Yep, as a driver, I've been racing since 2003.
Yeah. And here's a great question. I know the answer. Let me start with this. How many? And I think maybe you don't know the exact number, but how many race wins do you have? How many championships do you have? What's kind of give me loosely your resume, because I'm totally walking you right into this next question.
Yeah. I have 60 wins in street eliminator at Oxford, and I have a couple of top eliminator wins in a dragster at Oxford, as well as several wins at New England Dragway in the dragster, and a street win down there also.
Yep. So fair to call you an accomplished drag racer, just for reference. So here's where I'm going with this. Tell everybody what your car is and how much you paid for it.
My weekly street car is a 1990 Mustang GT. And it's really just fairly stock. I mean, I've done an exhaust upgrade and put some street legal slick tires on it, but other than that, it's fairly basic car.
Yeah, and I think you told me you paid $2,800 for it.
Yes, I did. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, I did. I paid $2,800 originally for that.
And so that car has all of those wins now, which I think is great. And I think, didn't you have a nickname for that car? Don't you guys have an affectionate little nickname for that thing?
I guess the place says M-Dog on it, and that's basically what we call it, just M-Dog.
Yeah, all right. So, but I think, anyway, I guess where I'm getting at, and you know where I'm going with this, is, and you touched on it, I think one of the things that I did not realize about drag racing, per se, is that all of drag racing in Maine is essentially bracket racing. And so what that means is essentially your staggered starts, and yes, you want to get to the finish line first, but you have to dial in the time you think the car is going to cover an eighth mile in, and you can't go under that, essentially. You can't go faster than what you say you're going to go. So you can literally drive the family minivan and win races if you're consistently hitting your number every time down the track. And so what I want to ask you about is some of the challenges in that. Like, I think everybody thinks, you just stand on the gas and go as fast as you can, which is somewhat true. But what are some of the things about the actual physical drag race that people don't know or might not understand?
Well, yeah, I mean, you really have to have great reflexes and be able to react to the starting line, the Christmas tree, as they call it, the lights that get you started down the track. And as you go down the course, a lot of people don't realize that you can also make judgment calls. Just because you put a time on your car and say the car ran the time twice, I mean, weather changes, the vehicle changes with temperature, all kinds of different things change, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to run that same number. So you have to expect at some point the vehicle may run quicker than what you predicted. So as you're going down course, you can actually look over at your opponent and possibly lift off the gas somewhat, because you have what you don't want to take the strike by too much, the finish line strike by too much. If you can close the gap up and not take it by as much, and then you take a chance. It's a lesser chance of going under your time, your breakout time that you predicted.
Right. What part of it do you like the most? Do you like that challenge kind of at the top end of the racetrack with, managing the competitor right over your shoulder, so to speak, and getting to the finish line at the right time? Or do you like the launch? Or is it simply about how fast can I go from point A to B? What are the things that you like the most about it?
Well, in my situation with my weekly race car / street car, I like the deal of playing defense because I'm usually the slower vehicle. So in other words, I usually leave the starting line first, and as I go down course, I have to look over my shoulder to see where the opponent is to make a decision whether I can lift off to make sure I don't break out or whether I have to stay in it. It's the challenge, I think, in my case, of trying to defeat something that's possibly better or quicker than what I have, which goes to show that, like I said in the past, anybody could come over and do it and not have to have a ton of money into it.
Right.
And not have a purpose-built, a purpose-built car as far as spending thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, it's nice to have that, but But, you can be shown that you don't have to have that.
Yeah, I think you were telling me that that there are times when you've thought about, man, I'd like to do this or do that, or I don't remember if you said you were interested in nitrous or any of that kind of stuff. But I remember you very clearly you did say, but then if I do that, I'm not the same kind of underdog, and I think you like the underdog role, which again, makes drag racing there's a little bit for everybody there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I have had thoughts in the past. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people look at my car that, have a true appreciation for it, and they love the way it is. And they are like, I wouldn't change a thing with the way it is. Well, then there's the other side where, well, it'd be nice to go out and get a 347 stroker engine and drop it in kind of thing. But, of course, it's not that simple because you have to change other things to go along with that. But, which is absolutely doable. I mean, that's not a problem. But it's, I think the deal of leaving it the way it is such a challenge, and I do like that challenge. I've accepted that challenge for many years, and I like showing people, like I said, that they can come over and not have to have anything special.
Yeah. I think that one of the things when the first trip I made to the Dragway, I think one of the things that jumped out at me was, man, there is a wide range of vehicles. I mean, if you're a car guy, if you're a car person at all, it's worth a trip just to check out some of the machines. Like there are some really cool cars, sleds, bikes, junior dragsters, whatever you're kind of interested in. There's something there for everybody, isn't there?
Oh, that is the great thing about drag racing is, you can be like, you take the street class, for example, you can have anything from a Cobra kit car to a Dodge Viper to, a minivan. And then you can move on to other classes, like you said, such as if you're into sleds and motorcycles, and you can see them go down the track. Yeah. And then if you're into an all-out purpose-built race car, such as a Raging Dragster or, some door car that might be all a tube chassis kind of deal, all pubbed out, then there's that interest. Yeah. I mean, you can have anything that runs from the low 5-second zone there all the way up into the, 12, 13-second zone.
Right.
So it's very, very, very big range in stuff there. I think it's there's something there for everyone. I think it's appealing. Something can be appealing to everyone there.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit, but I'll ask you again. At the risk of repeating myself, but you were telling me that this might right now, in 2018, might be the healthiest that drag racing in Maine has been, probably since 2000, in the last decade at least. I'd have to go back and look at what we talked about specifically, but I'm not really holding you to the numbers. But I did want to ask you about what is it that gives you that sense that that the sport is healthy in Maine and that the numbers are really good and hopefully can stay good for those of you that are doing that every week.
Yeah, I back in 2003, I'll never forget it. It was the first day that I actually went to the track to a competition, and on that day there was 5 vehicles in the class, and it was a little bit soft for a while in those early days, but now, up into 2018, I mean, we've seen 50 cars in the street. I mean, it's 40, 50 cars. We've seen it. And it's continued to grow, and some people, continue to go. Some people don't go. Other new people come in. I've seen some vehicles come out of the mothball or the woodworks, if you will, that we haven't seen in many years, and then all of a sudden they're reappearing. Yeah. Or we've seen people come from other tracks, such as New England Dragway in Epping, New Hampshire, or Winterport Dragway. We've seen them come from other tracks as well. And I think what helps with all of that is our manager, Jeff Schock, he's big into promoting it with social media. And I think that's just a huge thing with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is. And in today's day and age, social media has its negatives, but at the same time, at its root, it's free advertising. So... and there's a lot of ways you can use it, photos, video, and words. Those of us who are reporters, we still like words, so we think those work pretty well.
Yeah, right.
So I'm looking at while we're talking, I'm looking at the point standings, and I see that you have the lead again, which I know that you wanted. But I see you only got 20 points last Friday night, so I'm wondering what happened. I mean, that's like, what'd you win, 2 rounds and that was it?
Yeah,
Come on.
I've been having a tough time with the humidity. Mm-hmm. My car doesn't like humidity. I mean, most people don't really like humidity, but
so it makes your car just
mine's
like
a little
me.
bit. Mine's a little bit hard where it's it's computer controlled and fuel injected, and it's not liking it. And I misdialed it last week, and it would not run the number. And unfortunately, I was running against a very fast car that runs 7 seconds, and I was dialed in at 10 seconds approximately. It's about 3 seconds apart. So you can't. It's hard to judge something like that. The car's coming at you awful fast, but unfortunately, I misjudged the weather and the way the car would react to that, and I misdialed it, and I only did go 2 rounds, and it's unfortunate. I am in the point lead. It is by the skin of my teeth, though. There's no, I mean, that can all change Friday. If I go out early and the guy behind me does well, then that could all change.
When you said you misdialed, I thought maybe you forgot which car you were in and you dialed like a 790 or something. And I thought, that's probably not going to work.
No, I just misjudged. The other thing is, too, I mean, I don't want to make no excuses up, but I didn't really take into consideration. I had a passenger with me. He's a cousin, and the track allows you to take a passenger down the track with you during time trials, not during eliminations. And he's a kid, 14-year-old kid, and he wanted to go down the track, and he's 160 pounds. Yep. And for every 100 pounds that you add to the vehicle, it's about 1/10 of a second.
Huh.
And so as soon as he was out of the car,
right,
the car went more than 1/10 of a second faster.
I see. Yeah. Huh.
And I did not really take some of that into consideration.
Wow. You got to find a crew chief then.
I misjudged. I was off my game last week.
I didn't mean to turn this into beat up. Let Jamie beat himself up for 5 minutes. That wasn't my point. That wasn't my point.
No. No, that's all good.
I do want to ask you before I let you go, because another thing I think is interesting is you've gone to a bunch of national events. You've taken the family dragster and raced that in a bunch of national events, not only in Epping, New Hampshire, but Englishtown, and I think I know you listed some other places, and certainly you can name them if you want. You don't have to, but does drag racing change? Like you're in Maine on Friday night at Oxford Dragway, and maybe you go to Winterport on a Sunday. But when you go to some of these national events, is drag racing different, or is that family community atmosphere still exist no matter where you go?
Oh, I think it's so to touch on where I've been, I've been to Englishtown, I've been to in New Jersey, and I've been to Oxford, obviously. I've been to Epping in New Hampshire, and I've been to Sentinel in Canada. I have been to Winterport. Those are the ones as a driver that I can think of right offhand. But to get back to as far as how it may differ on a different level or a different place, I think what it is when you're on the local place like Oxford, it's just a smaller family, a smaller community, and you tend to know everybody like that. And I think when you go to the bigger platforms, such as an NHRA National, it's just a bigger family, and you do get to know some of those folks, especially that are in the same category that you will be racing in. But I mean, they're all very friendly. They're just as friendly at a national as they are at a local Friday night at Oxford. It's just a complete different level, and obviously a lot more people.
Right. And I think so. I guess where I kind of would like to wrap up with you is because I know you're also, you told me you're also a fan of stock car racing. But I think there's probably a couple of differences, right? If we're talking about whether it's Oxford Plains Speedway on a Saturday night and Oxford Plains Dragway on a Friday night. So I would love for you to tell us about just what are the differences? Like what if you think I'm just going to a race event and you had no idea, what would jump out at you about drag racing as different from circle track stuff?
Oh, wow. If I was somebody that was going and didn't really, I'm just trying to think. Probably I think for me it's probably the easier access to the drag racing versus the stock car. Like if you go to, if I use the big platform, for example, like if you use the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series, without very, very special passes, it's hard to get in to possibly meet a driver or see the crew or watch them work on the car or something like that. As to if you go to, say, a big drag race or any drag race for that matter, I suppose, you can meet the driver. I mean, you don't have to, there's no effort there to do that. I mean, they just have a little roped off section for the crews to work on their cars. But it's very accessible, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's easy access to meet the driver or meet the crew or be up close to the vehicle, I guess, is what I would say. That's what I would think the biggest differences would be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I think if I were to...
and very fan-friendly, too. Very fan-friendly.
Yep. I mean, you let me hang out with you basically for an entire night, and we'd never met before. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I did too. It was fun. It was a great night. Listen, I've kept you long enough. I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm going to keep an eye on these point standings, and I'm going to call you out every time I see you give up a night like you did on Friday, okay?
That sounds good. I need somebody to kick me in the butt and straighten me out.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, thanks for coming on, and best of luck to you the rest of the season.
Okay. I really appreciate it very much.
You bet. Thanks again to Jamie. Thanks again to Greg Emerson, who came on before to talk about Beech Ridge. Thanks to both of our guests. Really good stuff this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a little bit different, and I think as we strive to keep making this thing good, or at least mediocre enough that you'll listen to it, I hope you liked what we had this week, again, on Loose Wheels. So, a reminder, centralmaine.com/sports, at T Barrett GWC on Twitter, as well as at Central ME Sports, and of course on Facebook you can find us Central Maine Sports. So we'd love to have you along. Share the podcast with your friends, share the post, download it. If you want to keep on listening to it, let people know that you like it. That, of course, is my shameless plug for self-promotion. Have to do that. I am contractually obligated to do that every week. But thanks again for listening to the 10th anniversary edition of Loose Wheels. I don't think that's how an anniversary works. But anyway, we're happy to have you along, and we'll see you at the racetrack this week, hopefully. Get out and enjoy it. Summer is blitzing by, but it's the best time of year, and it's certainly the best time of year in Maine. So, again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week on Loose Wheels.